Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we ask if the traitor Warmaster Horus made a mistake in not focusing on Guilliman first during the heresy. No real need for a spoiler warning today, but just keep in mind I will be mentioning events from across the Horus Heresy, so you have been warned. But with that said, let's waste no time and just jump straight in. Now, for all the many events that have transpired during the Horus Heresy, it can really be broken down into two main theatres post-Istvan: the push for Terra, and the Shadow Crusade against Ultramar, or just Ultramar if you prefer. There's a million individual events and circumstances that tell their own narratives, but you can pretty much fit any of them into either of those two categories. As we know, Horus's main, and in truth sole objective for his war, was to face and defeat his father. And to do so, he knew he needed to not only reach the throne world, but to breach the Imperial Palace too. And coming out of Istvan, arguably the only real major obstacle to him reaching the throne world, indeed outright victory in his eyes, was Roboute Guilliman and the Ultramarines Legion. Yes, the other loyalists were of course threats, but such was the size of Guilliman's Legion. It was really like having two legions in one, if not more in some cases. And that's not even considering the vast resources of Ultramar that Guilliman could bring to bear too. The 13th Legion was by far and away the biggest problem. And that's not even considering the tactical and strategic genius of its Primarch. The two of those combined literally jeopardised Horus's chance of victory. And so we know Horus took action to eliminate this threat, or at the very least remove it from the table for long enough so he could achieve his victory on the throne world, before then turning to eliminate Guilliman. The combined force of Lorgar and Angron, the Wordbearers Legion and the World Eaters, were tasked with bringing Guilliman and Ultramar to ruin, for Lorgar to concoct his ruin storm, pinning Guilliman to the eastern fringe, if he couldn't be eliminated. And you could argue that this worked, as Guilliman of course never arrived to Terra in time, missing all of the Siege of Terra in fact. However, in truth, it was the pressure of Guilliman being on the way, arriving to Terra, that forced Horus to take the risky action that he did, allowing the Emperor to board the vengeful spirit. The entirety of the traitor siege was constantly pressured by the race against time. That every second being held out by Rogal Dorn was a second closer to Guilliman's arrival. And so it's definitely worth asking the question: did Horus make a mistake? Should he have prioritised taking out Guilliman and Ultramar himself first, before then heading to the throne world? Of course, hindsight is a wonderful thing. Yes is the immediate answer that springs to mind, because ultimately Horus lost. But the truth is, it's not that straightforward. First of all, the Wordbearers and the World Eaters were no small force in their own right, already formidable. And yet when Sanguinius arrived to the throne world himself, he reported to Malcador and Rogal that Guilliman essentially still had his entire legion en route. So if Horus really wanted to destroy Guilliman and claim Ultramar, it would have had to have been a huge undertaking. Secondly, the Wordbearers' ambush against the Ultramarines at Calth, and the following elevation of Angron to demonhood at Nuceria, were essential parts of the ruin storm engulfing the galaxy. If Horus chose a different course of action, there's a possibility that that wouldn't transpire, making life a lot easier for the loyalist forces. Though you'd imagine the ruin storm would still be desired. And lastly, though Guilliman was very much on his own at the outbreak of the heresy, he does in time become bolstered by the arrivals of the Angel and Lion L. Johnson. Though it does have to be noted that L. Johnson had split his legion by this time, placing some under the command of Corswain. I don't think the Emperor himself is an issue, as he would have still been stuck upon the Golden Throne, and the war in the Webway would still ultimately have been lost. And though Rogel would technically be freer to act, I think he would have still been focused on defending Terra, believing that Horus was coming, and let's assume he would have still been largely blinded by the ruin storm as well. Honestly, I can see a lot of positives in focusing on Guilliman first. I think it was undoubtedly Horus's biggest mistake that he allowed Guilliman to be pressuring him at his back throughout the siege. However, again, it would undeniably be a big undertaking, as Ultramar is a truly vast empire, especially back within the days of the heresy. So it would be no small commitment. And honestly, from that standpoint, you can kind of understand it as a choice. Ultramar or Terra, because he couldn't feasibly do both. Let's not be fooled into thinking that the path to the throne world was a walk in the park, because it wasn't. The traitors had to fight every inch of the way there. And every day not spent doing that was a day that Rogel made it all the harder for them. So Horus would still most likely have had to split his forces to keep that progress towards the throne world being made. And every legion not focused on Ultramar is a win for Guilliman in that situation. I will say though, even with that, Horus surely had enough might on his side to make a straight assault for Macragge, ignoring wider Ultramar, which was simply too vast to worry about at the time, and making a beeline straight for Guilliman. If a protracted war across Ultramar would have resulted in the same issues that Horus faced anyway, only this time from Rogel, then surely a lightning quick assault against Macragge wouldn't. As good as Guilliman is, and as large as his legion is, I don't think he'd be able to stop the combined might of, say, the Sons of Horus and the Death Guard added to an assault against Macragge. And definitely not with Horus and Mortarion added to the mix as well. Let's not forget there was a reason that Horus made the perfect Warmaster after all. I think most of us would agree that Horus and Mortarion is a big upgrade over just Lorgar and Angron. If Horus had have chosen that route, it's definitely likely that Guilliman and Macragge would have fallen. So, why didn't he do it? Well, I think it fundamentally came down to a combination of all three of the main factors. The reasons he focused on the throne world in the first place, the sheer size of the galaxy, the resources it would have taken, and the time required. Quite simply, the galaxy is vast, extremely vast. Even with warp travel and the ruin storm on his side, it still takes a long time to get anywhere. And Guilliman was on the very eastern fringe, the complete opposite side of the galaxy to the throne world. Ultramar was too vast to consider, But even an attempted direct assault upon Guilliman at Macragge would have still been a big undertaking to make, taking Horus and a bulk of his forces in the complete opposite direction to the throne world. And that was an undertaking that he actually spent travelling to Malek, entering into the warp and bargaining with the gods of chaos. And that of course would have all still had to have happened, only after any assault against Guilliman had been made. And then we have the resources aspect. Not only does Guilliman have the strongest legion, but he has an empire of resources at his disposal too. A capital of Macragge deserving to be the head of an empire. That is a literal fortress. And of course then his own ability. Regardless of Horus pulling together a stronger force, he wouldn't have taken Guilliman and Macragge without taking huge losses in manpower and casualties, as well as armaments and supply. All things that would have need to have been replenished and repaired after. And again, all leading to time. Yes, the argument has always been made that time was against the Emperor, that Horus didn't even have to strike at the throne world, that he could bleed the loyal forces dry. But the truth is, Horus didn't have the luxury of time. Even in this scenario of striking Guilliman, every day and week lost was more time for Sanguinius to return, more time for the Lion, for Jagatai and Russ to reach the throne world and rebuild their legions, for Rogel to formulate new strategy, new fortifications, to harness the Imperium's forces. And the second word escaped that Horus was in Ultramar, well then the reins would be off. Rogel would unleash Russ and the Kargan. He would have most definitely have reclaimed Mars, realising he had the opportunity for a counter-offensive against the forces pushing towards the throne world, making that ultimate pathway for the traitors all the harder, if not completely lost. So he could have maybe focused on taking Guilliman out, but there's a very real chance it could have cost him the Western Front. And so, it really all did boil down to a simple choice. Guilliman and Ultramar, or the Emperor and the throne world. And in that sense, as much as having Guilliman at his back was a risk, it was really the only choice that Horus could make. Because the throne world was always the true objective, the true fight. Committing himself to anything else just wasn't the right move to make. Stalling Guilliman with Lorgar and Angron, cutting him off and trapping him across the galaxy with the Ruinstorm, as well as his main rivals Sanguinius and El Johnson, simply made the most practical sense. Because as strong as the traitors were, the Imperium still had a lot of its might it could bring to bear, and Horus quite simply needed to keep that from happening. But as always everyone, what do you think? Do you think that Horus made a mistake in not ensuring that Guilliman was taken out properly? And if so, how do you think he should have done it? Was it really only feasible by himself in person? Would he have perhaps had more luck if he sent Perturabo to tie Guilliman up? Or did he in truth know in his heart of hearts none of his kin were up to the task? And if he had focused on Ultramar and Guilliman, would that have caused him to lose the Western Front? Do you think that Rogel would have retaken Mars? And would he have unleashed Russ and the Khan? As always everyone, leave your thoughts in the comments below. A huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.